survive at the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and we've had a child, Zod. A boy child. This is Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at superhero movies that were poorly received upon release and only talk about the things we liked and what the movie does well. It's sometimes a challenge, but always a good time. And this week we are talking Man of Steel. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by the last son of Comic-Con, Andrew Williams. You ready to jump into this one, Andrew?
That was a good one. Yeah, I'm ready for this one. It's been a bit of a divisive film, so I'm interested to dive into it.
Yeah, a little bit. Planning this podcast, putting the movies together, it was kind of inevitable that we would get around to the DCEU, and we're starting it now with the first movie of that universe. And like you said, definitely divisive. I do want to make it clear, because I know obviously this movie has its defenders, its fans, as do really every movie we talk about, but especially some of these DCEU movies, that we don't necessarily pick these movies or at all based on our personal taste or preference. It's all about trying to gauge that reception, whether it's critical or audience reaction or the internet. And divisive is the nicest way to say that for most of these movies. Some of these DCEU movies are, I don't know, more negative than that, I would say. But certainly
the
this first
fan base is passionate. There are very ardent defenders that really appreciate this take on them, and there are others that it doesn't land for. And that creates kind of a more so. It's not so much that they exist, but it seems that divide is very harsh in this case. I think that's really what it is. There's a pretty stark transition between them. So really, I think the best place is to start at the top.
Yeah, this is the first one, and given the premise of our show, I'm sure you guys can assume we're going to be covering other movies in this universe. So let me just go and say here at the top, if you're a fan of these movies, if you are one of those adamant defenders, if there's stuff in here that you think genuinely works that maybe other people just aren't seeing, let us know what those are. Help us out. Send us an email, bestoftherestpod@gmail.com. Tell us which movie in this universe you like, why you like it, what's the best performance. Even this episode you're listening to now, Man of Steel, if you've got some positive thoughts on it, go ahead and send it in to us. We will include that on a later episode. When we cover the movies you're talking about, we will read your emails. So send them in, bestoftherestpod@gmail.com. Now, Andrew, I know you saw this movie in theaters. How many times is the question?
At least twice. Possibly 3 times. I know I saw it like opening night, and then I know I saw it again because I saw it for one of my friend's birthday. Like I saw it with my brother opening night, and then I saw it again with my friend for his birthday. So at least twice, possibly more.
Yeah. Now, as is evident on our past Superman episodes, you are a big fan of this character.
Yes. Love
Were
Superman.
you
Still a huge fan.
Oh, sure. Were you pretty hyped when this movie was coming out?
I was, because to that point, we'd had Superman Returns in 2006, and that was kind of a very similar mode of like, it came, it kind of went, didn't really build to anything. It kind of came and it went. It was very, I guess the tactful way of putting it, it was very, it spent a lot of time honoring the previous Superman films. So at times it didn't quite feel like its own thing. And this felt like very much like we're getting a new take. We're getting a new version. It's free from all the potential baggage of what came before. And just with the stuff we'd been seeing. I mean, this is 2013. So at that point, we're post-Avengers at this point. So the idea of Justice League, Batman, Superman, those sorts of things are all starting to swim around in your head. So the idea of, all right, we're getting Superman. And I feel like it was made very kind of clear at the offset that Man of Steel really was going to be the start of a cinematic universe. Or at least that was very much the thought process. So Going in, obviously Christopher Nolan being involved definitely piqued my interest. There's a lot of stuff that was definitely making me pretty amped to see Superman back on kind of a main stage again as potentially being like a pillar of Warner Brothers output. And yeah, when that opening, I was there first showing opening night.
I saw it opening night as well. I can't say I was super hyped for it. I'm not nearly as big of a Superman fan as you are. I like the character enough, but that alone didn't get me hyped. And we'll talk about Zack Snyder in a minute, but I didn't love all of his movies before this, so that wasn't getting me hyped. But I do remember one of the later trailers they released had the shot of Superman walking across the snowscape, and the shot of his cape and his first flight. And I was like, okay, that's some pretty good imagery. Like there might be something here, and that got me a little bit excited. And I saw it opening night. I did not watch this movie again until this week, preparing for this episode. So, it probably tells you I wasn't super hot on it, but it was great to re-examine it. What is this? Oh my God, almost 8-9 years later. That's doesn't feel like
we're
it was
8 years
ago.
later. It feels, it's odd that this. I mean, the DCEU is like, it's 8 years old. It feels so much longer ago. And maybe that's just because we've grown as people, as we're in a different place now than we were then. So it just feels like a greater passage. But yeah,
at the time of this recording, we have a Suicide Squad sequel, reboot. I mean, DCU has kind of become this totally different thing than it was back then. So it certainly feels like there's been some passage of time. But let's rewind the clock. Let's set the stage. June 14th, 2013. That's when this movie was released, made on a budget of roughly $250 million. Brings in at the box office $668 million. That's a hit. That's a profit. However,
that is money.
Critically, pretty split, pretty divisive, as you said earlier. Critic score of 56% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, notably, the audience score is much higher with a 75% rating from the audience reviews.
Yeah, so it's definitely something that picked up a certain traction with a bigger audience. I think there was definitely people that liked the idea of what they were trying to do with their approach to Superman here. But it definitely latched on with a certain segment of the audience. And I think, especially now in the years later, especially now that Cavill may not be returning to the role again, I think that's, made people look back at this one a little bit more fondly, of kind of appreciating his performance as it was.
Now, this movie is written by David S. Goyer. I don't want to get to it. I mean, the history of this movie, getting it made. I mean, Superman as a franchise, so many start and stops over time, so many different writers coming into pitching stuff. But the version that we eventually got is written by David S. Goyer. Now, there's a story credit from Nolan, but it's safe to say with the sole writing credit going to David S. Goyer, my guess is Nolan did nothing more than look over and say, hey, looks good, buddy.
Well, it's interesting because they talked about the process and the idea, I guess, for Man of Steel came out of Goyer and Nolan kind of workshopping ideas for Dark Knight Rises. That's kind of where Goyer came to Nolan and was like, I've got this idea for Superman that I think is kind of interesting. So it's Nolan that pitches it to Warner Brothers, I guess, and is like, hey, Goyer's got this idea. I'm willing to come on board as a producer and kind of help the movie through. So yeah, where he comes in and out of that story, I don't really know. But on this one, Nolan definitely has a bit of a hand in it, as far as just kind of at least seeing it through. With I guess kind of doing them a solid since he was finished with Batman.
It reminds me of those movies that are like presented by Quentin Tarantino. Like he had nothing to do with it creatively, but like he puts his name on it to get a wider release in America.
And just attract some interest, yeah.
David S. Goyer, very well known in the comic book movie realm, right? I mean, he has some writing credits before his time in comics with things like The Puppet Master, which I didn't realize he wrote. But then quickly gets into things like The Crow, City of Angels, Dark City, most notably probably all three Blade movies, with him actually directing the third one.
Yeah, I want to clarify. He doesn't actually write Puppet Master. He writes a different movie called The Puppet Masters, which is based off a Robert Heinlein story. So it's not The Puppet Master you're thinking of.
Okay.
That's needlessly confusing. But yeah, he's got a lot of involvement there. That
so just known for superhero movies. Let me scratch that.
Really, generally, like
movies.
His film credits before this are pretty limited. And then he's got some horror credits, but yeah, mostly superhero movies, especially comics too. He comes in to write and co-write various comics over the years as well. So like he's really made his name for himself there.
Batman Begins, Jumper, which isn't a comic movie, but it is, and Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. He reminds me a bit because it's kind of a, as far as the reception on these movies, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Something like Batman Begins is critically acclaimed. Something like Blade Trinity or Ghost Rider 2, not so much. The parallel I like to use of David S. Goyer is he's a bit like Vince Russo in the wrestling world, where he's been involved in some very, very good stories, but you never know how much of that is from him, how much of it is another creative force sort of reining him in, kind of all over the place.
Right. I think that's a very interesting notion, because you look at even things like the Nolan Batman trilogy. Batman Begins, he's got a co-writing credit and shares it with Nolan on the final film. And with Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, he just has story credits. The final scripts are not by him. And even stuff like Blade 2, he's got a writing credit, but it's Guillermo del Toro that's directing it. And he has a huge hand in the creativity of all of his movies. So it really is difficult to parse out like where Goyer ends and the other creatives begin. And so when that situation happens, you tend to try to look towards the things where it really was just him. And so it creates a very, very, very varied filmography. Just a whole, it's all over the place, really.
This movie is, of course, directed by Zack Snyder. I'm going to go through all of his movies that he made up till this point. Dawn of the Dead, which I love.
Yeah.
300. I usually just say it's not for me. I'm not going to say it's a bad movie or anything. Watchmen, I've watched plenty of times over the years. And then he makes Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, Sucker Punch, Man of Steel. It's a pretty interesting filmography up to this point.
It is, and it's interesting because it's the first four are all either remakes or adaptations. Watchmen or Dawn of the Dead, 300, Watchmen, and Legends of the Guardians are all either adaptations of works, or in the case of Dawn of the Dead, a remake of a previous work. Sucker Punch is his first real, like, my idea, my story, my script, my direction, my everything. And then Man of Steel is kind of the next big move for him after that. So it's, again, a very interesting filmography, because there's some like Legend of the Guardians. If you watch that movie, you'd probably never know it was a Zack Snyder movie. Like,
have you seen it? I've never watched that movie.
It's an animated movie about owls.
It's not that it looked bad. It's just like, really? This is what Zack Snyder did after Watchmen?
It's kind of like George Miller when they tried to make Mad Max 4 in the 90s with Mel Gibson, and he was like, at a certain point, he was like, well, this isn't going to go anywhere, so I'm going to go make Happy Feet instead. It's like, wait, you're going to do what? And then not only that, trying to make Mad Max 4 came after he made Babe, Pig in the City. He was like, well, done with the pigs. Let's go make Mad Max again. So, but yeah, yeah. So by this point, he was not really an unknown quantity. I mean, at this point, you had a decent, I don't know what the term would be, but you had a decent,
some name recognition. You
have some name recognition. You've got like a good sample size of what he's capable of.
Yeah.
That was the term, sample size. That's what I was looking for.
I was surprised revisiting this movie, because I always say, like I said, I really like Dawn of the Dead. Looking back at it now, it almost doesn't feel like a Zack Snyder movie, because it doesn't have a lot of his trademarks, whether it's the slow-mo, the CGI, the muted color palette. And I always cite 300 as the point where Zack Snyder kind of became Zack Snyder. Man of Steel is well beyond that point. And this movie doesn't feel super Zack Snyder-y. I mean, it's got that muted color palette, but I don't think there's any slow motion in this movie. And it's shot on film, which I was very surprised to see.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there was, I remember that first trailer when it hit with all the shots that it had, like a lot of like, just like very like handheld angled shots kind of showing like the farm stuff, these great landscapes. And I remember even watching that trailer just being like, wow, this doesn't look like anything else Zack Snyder has done. And I remember being impressed by that. And the final film, like you said, still doesn't really feel like Watchmen or certainly Sucker Punch or 300. It doesn't feel like any of them. Dawn of the Dead really is kind of the anomaly, because like you said, that's his first movie. You had a James Gunn script there too. So Dawn of the Dead really just had like a whole bunch of stuff firing in its favor. And it is 300, I think, where he starts using the CGI green screens a lot, does all of that. But yeah, this one is definitely, I don't know if he's experimenting. I don't know if Nolan was kind of giving him some pointers on some ideas. I really don't know, but it doesn't end up feeling a lot like Zack Snyder's work to that point, or even his work since then, really.
Well, let's jump into the story this movie is telling. Clark Kent is an alien, spoilers, with incredible powers, who uses his abilities to help those in need as he wanders the country. After finding a ship from his home planet buried here on Earth, he learns that he was sent here because his home planet of Krypton and all of its people were destroyed. We learn this isn't exactly true when Kryptonian General Zod and his small army arrive on our planet, demanding the alien hiding among us be handed over. Zod intends to remake Earth in Krypton's image, destroying humanity in the process, and the alien, now known as Superman, must decide between his biological race and his adopted one. Now, Andrew, that's kind of a 10,000-foot overview of this movie. I didn't even talk about Lois Lane or his time on the farm. A lot happens in this movie. It's got a long running time, well over 2 hours. Tells a pretty long yarn, as it were.
Yes, a dense story, as it were. A lot happening. We've got military subplots. We've got Lois. We've got Daily Planet stuff. We've got Clark Kent deep sea crab fishing. It's this movie has everything.
And we're going to talk about it. And we're going to talk about the best parts about it and the things that we like and what works, because that's what we do on this #positivity podcast. And Andrew, I think we should probably make an effort to really look at this movie in a vacuum. We, years later, we know what happens after this. We know where this franchise goes and the story it tells. Let's try to put ourselves in the shoes of 2013. This is the only story we have so far. What is working?
Yeah, I believe so. I think we should look at it definitely within the place, look at where the world was. Where were we as a people? Where were you and I as people? Where were we looking to go?
This is post 9/11, pre-COVID.
This is post 9/11, it's pre-COVID. We're looking at, it was a different time. There was an optimism in the air. We were ready for a Superman movie. No, I think that's a good way to approach it. Because like I said, obviously we know the DCEU as it continues from this. We know that what's kind of happened to it. It's kind of odd place that it's in now. But I think for the purpose of this conversation, let's definitely look at Man of Steel on its own without really talking about where it goes.
First things first, we're jumping into the cast of this movie, and as is tradition, we're going to start at the top, at the best casting, at the best performance in this movie. We like to recognize the actor or actress that gives the best performance, that elevates the role that they were given, that raises the quality of the entire movie. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, let me ask you, who gets your Mark Strong Award for Man of Steel?
I thought there was going to be a couple of contenders for this, but rewatching it, as far as I'm concerned, one person stands head and shoulders above the rest, and that is Michael Shannon as General Zod.
Hell yes. Hell yeah. He is so good in this movie.
He is so good in this movie. And there's so many little ticks to his character that I really, really like. I just, everything he's doing, when he's on screen, I'm interested. I'm pulled back in. He's got a great nuance to what he's doing. He has this intense loyalty to Krypton, and everything he's doing is motivated out of his it's a misguided sense of loyalty at times, but it's still this loyalty to Krypton, and he sells it. Michael Shannon I don't know why he's not in all the things at this point.
He certainly should be. Back on the Amazing Spider-Man 2 episode, I said that Dane DeHaan's going to play a villain his entire life. Michael Shannon is pretty much in that role too. He's gonna be a villain or crazy because the dude looks and sounds intense as hell all the time. The year before this, he was in a movie called Premium Rush with Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yes,
which is, I really like that movie because the stakes are so small. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a mail carrier. He's delivering a package, and Michael Shannon wants to get the package from him, and that's pretty much it. He's chasing him through the city, but his his performance is so good in that. I highly recommend. He gets the Mark Strong Award for that movie as well. Highly recommend checking out that movie if you haven't seen it. His turn here as General Zod. I'm going to go ahead and say this. The reason we have the Mark Strong Award is because in Green Lantern, Mark Strong steps into the role of Sinestro, and you go, holy crap, this guy's on another level. This could have been a nothing role or a generic villain role, and he is elevating it to a point where I can't imagine anyone else as Sinestro. I think this is maybe the first time since we covered Green Lantern where I feel that strongly about an actor coming into a role like this that's not the lead and punching so far above what is being asked of them that they are elevated. I can't imagine anyone else as General Zod now. They will inevitably be compared to this performance, in my opinion. We're going to get into some of the characterization of Superman and the story this movie is telling and how it's kind of an alternate take in a lot of ways. But this General Zod is pretty straightforward. General Zod that would work in any adaptation. He's got a lot of lines that really encapsulate the character. The one I wrote down here, he says, I have a duty to my people, and I will not let anyone prevent me from carrying it out. That's General Zod.
That's General Zod.
Militia, that military loyalty and what's the word? Dedication to the cause.
Yeah.
So militant about it, and nothing will stand in my way. He nails it.
He's so good. He just, like I said, obviously Terrence Stamp's performance as General Zod in the Christopher Reeve movies is also iconic in its own way. Obviously, the kneel before Zod kind of comes from there. It's like I said, it's an iconic line. So he's even kind of already so with Mark Strong, he's coming into Sinestro, a role to that point that hadn't been defined. To that point, no one, Sinestro, as far as live action film had gone, no one had ever really gone there before. Now with General Zod, we've got a frame of reference performance from Terrence Stamp, which again, I think is very good. But then here, it's something that I think within the framework of the story they're telling here works perfectly. Like he like you said, he's militant, he's dedicated to the cause, he's completely dialed in. Everything he's doing, he believes has an intense purpose. And not only that, he believes in what he's doing. When they, like you said in the description, the way to bring Krypton back is at the expense of everyone on Earth. And as far as General Zod's concerned, okay, great.
That's
how
about
Krypton comes back. He doesn't even question it because that's how Krypton comes back. And as far as he's concerned, that's all that matters. And this is, again, coming off of him being imprisoned on Krypton for his attempted a coup. So, even after all of that, he still wants to bring the planet back and will do anything at any cost to do it. And Shannon sells that at every turn.
And he can be so scary, genuinely scary, that in the beginning on Krypton, when he finds out that Kal-El has been sent away and they're arresting him and he's screaming at Laurel, he's like, I will find him. I will find him. And to be a mom, this guy screaming, he's going to find your baby. It's terrifying.
Yeah. He's so
sorry
good.
for your speakers if I just blew them out, but
yeah, he's just so, and Michael Shannon, obviously he's, like you said, though, even something like Shape of the Water, he plays a real piece of work in that one.
The Shape of Water, Andrew.
What?
The Shape of Water.
The Shape of the Water, whatever it's called.
You're putting an extra "the" in there.
It's, The Shape of the Water. What is The Shape? No, I'm not even joking. His first film, and one of the things I still remember him from, is his bit part in Groundhog Day. He's one of the brief people that he deals with there. If any fans watching remember the couple he gives the WrestleMania tickets to, they get really excited. He's the husband in that couple. So I
gotta look this up now. That sounds amazing.
It's pretty funny. Like I said, he's barely in the movie. He's in there for 2 scenes. They're short, but it's very funny. But he literally has a line where he's like, WrestleMania tickets, no way. So yeah, just
I gotta look that up.
Saying that.
I love whenever actors blow up and they're well known, and they go back to a nothing performance, and you see them in Annie Hall. There's a 2-second shot of this hallway, and Jeff Goldblum picks up a phone and holds it to his ear. And then that's it. He's just a guy in the background answering a phone. I remember watching that and being like, what? Jeff Goldblum, man. I'm waiting for him to come back or have a line. No, that's
Nope.
it. He was the guy who answers phone in hallway in that movie.
I love doing that, like Paul Rudd in Halloween 6, or like Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger in Texas Chainsaw: The Next
Yeah.
Generation. Like, just these. It's always funny to go back and see these things. But like I'm a huge fan of Michael Shannon. He's done a lot of really good stuff. He obviously not his first comic book turn. He was in the maligned Jonah Hex a few years before this,
I haven't seen that one yet, but
which we may get to one day.
I can't say we certainly will.
Midnight Special, another one.
Oh, that's a good one.
Take Shelter, not Give Me Shelter. That's a Rolling Stones song, but Take Shelter.
And he's not
really
a bad
one.
guy in Midnight Special, right?
He's not. I don't think. No, he's definitely not. But
yeah.
So he does have some range, and like I actually like him too in what's that Christmas movie that I'm in? The Night Before.
He's really good in that.
He's
the mysterious drug dealer,
the mysterious weed dealer who throws crazy Christmas parties. He's pretty funny in that one too. But yeah, so just a great actor, and just again for this one, he's like going so above and beyond. I remember listening to him talk about. This whole episode is just going to be gushing about Michael Shannon.
That's fine. Point. That's the best part of the movie.
He was telling this story about when he met with Zack Snyder for the first time. And I remember listening to this either in the lead up to the movie or after it came out. And like, so he goes to Zack Snyder's house in like California or wherever it is. And he's like, so Zack sits him down and he's like, all right, here's what we're doing. And he's like, I can't give you a script because we're not done with the script yet. And I don't want to give it to you, but I'm going to walk you through the whole movie. So Zack Snyder, like, using like gestures and like drawings and everything, like walks Michael Shannon through this whole movie. And so he's sitting in Zack Snyder's house, like he's looking out this window and like he can see the Rose Bowl and there's like hummingbirds flying by and he's hearing this giant epic Superman story from Zack Snyder. And he's like, man, am I on acid? What is happening right now? And but he comes into this and he's just, like you said, I think since Mark Strong, he's the first one I think genuinely is like taking it to an unrealistic level almost. It's pretty, but it's a great performance. He genuinely elevates the movie in every scene he's in.
And he does all of this with the most dorky ass haircut I've ever seen.
Yes.
It's up there. Maybe not ever, but it's pretty bad.
It's up there. Like it's like the little like cut line right in the front. Like it's that cut your mom gives you when you're in like second grade.
And did you know that his armor is CG? Yeah. He's not actually wearing it. Looks incredible. It
does.
No idea. Like maybe knowing if I go back and look for it, I'll find something. But it didn't take me out of the movie at all. I think very good job with that.
There's like one or two sequences where you kind of see, but like in those moments, I'm like, I would assume the whole thing's CG in those moments where like it's just something where I'm watching two CG characters fight. But yeah,
even like Iron Man, like whenever he's got a CG suit, sometimes looks like he's like a floating head, like it looks disconnected. I never had that feeling watching Zod. So awesome.
Definitely not. And he got himself into some shape too, because those sequences without the suit, that dude looks pretty ripped, and it doesn't look enhanced.
Well, there's other people in this movie as well, Andrew. We've got to talk about all of them. Also, we have Henry Cavill as Kal-El / Clark Kent / Superman. This is it's funny, everybody knows who he is now, but a British actor, which is funny. I remember my stepdad making a comment at the time. He was like, man, none of these American superheroes are played by Americans. Wolverine's Canadian, I understand, but he's played by an Australian. We've got Superman here. We've got Tom Holland as Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. Everybody putting on this American accent to play these characters. And he does a great job though. Like I wouldn't think for a second that he has any kind of accent or he's British. Like Hugh Jackman, I can hear him putting on an American accent. It's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Canadian accent or whatever. You can tell. Don't think twice with Henry Cavill though.
You don't. He's really good. I remember before this, like he's a relative unknown before this. He's not somebody that really you had heard a lot of. I remember The Tudors was a show that he was on at the time. The Immortals movie he was in was coming out just before this.
I saw doing research, looking at his filmography. He's in The Count of Monte Cristo with Guy Pearce, which I've seen a ton. I haven't watched it in a while, but I don't know how bit his part is. But I got to go back now and scan the movie for him.
He's also in Hellraiser 8, continuing this trend of actors appearing in late stage horror sequels before getting famous. But yeah, it's a pretty limited, like obviously he'd done things, but nothing really break out until probably this, or the hype for this kind of put him on the map. And since then he's done a whole bunch of things. But
now,
yeah.
supposedly he was cast as early as Superman Flyby. Did you see that?
Yeah, I was reading that, which is so weird because like Superman Flyby, he would have been like 21, like 20.
I mean, I saw like the article that I'm curious how true that is because it's very, the timeline just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But
because Superman Flyby is like July 2002 when that happened, so he would have been legit like 19. Like that's, and don't get me wrong, I mean, if you're looking for longevity or you're looking for a particularly young Superman, I guess not necessarily a normal take, but hey, go to town. But yeah, so it's odd. Yeah.
Now, talking about getting ripped, putting on muscles. I mean, we've had instances, Nicolas Cage and Ghost Rider. Holy crap, we Hugh Jackman, of course. But this is my note here. Shirtless Henry doesn't even look real. This does not look like a real. He looks like an alien. I believe that.
Yeah.
This
like he does not look like an actual person. He looks like
you took the best muscles from other athletes and combined them all together. He's got like the pecs of Brock Lesnar and the abs of
Michael Phelps.
The abs of Michael Phelps. Thank you. It's ridiculous.
It's genuinely crazy.
Fair.
He's absolutely jacked for this. He said he was like, I mean, just that the interview I read, it's like he was working out for 2 hours a day. He was taking like 5,000 calories. He was kind of putting Hugh Jackman to shame for this one. Like, Jesus, like going to town. Like, I mean, I guess if you get paid to do it, it's one thing, but still, holy hell, that's got to be some dedication.
I mean, I don't want to take anything. He obviously put in the work.
Right.
He does a good job. I like him as Superman. I think he's got the look, which is maybe more than any other superhero character. It's important just to have that chiseled jaw, that look, that presence of Superman, and he nails it.
He does. He's got the look. And it's like you said, it's odd that like Superman is a character that like it's always interesting to hear about actors who were almost Superman, because some of them just, I can't fathom it, because I'm like, you don't look like Superman.
Nicolas
like Superman
Cage
is a character where it's like you have this clear image of what he's supposed to be. And just even like some of the names that were floated for like the Christopher Reeve Superman, where they were talking like Burt Reynolds or like Robert Redford, and you're just
Paul
like,
Newman,
I can't, Paul Newman, like I can't see it. Like, I just can't see those. And like even Sylvester Stallone, who like supposedly lobbied for it, I'm just like, I can't see it. Like, I can't see you as Superman. But like, even with like Cavill, when they announced him, I was like, yeah, that dude looks just like Superman. And even with Ralph before, to him, to his credit, everyone was like, oh, you look just like Christopher Reeve, so you'll be fine. Like, but it was still like, we're drawing a comparison to something that came before. So yeah, the look is important for Superman. Like you said, probably more than anybody else. Anybody else really can look almost any way, but with Superman, it very is a specific, you kind of got to have it.
Yeah. I alluded to it earlier, but this movie has its own take on Superman. He isn't exactly the do-good Boy Scout that maybe we're used to. This movie kind of hints that we're maybe getting there. So he's definitely doing something different than Christopher Reeve, which I think is smart. I mean, no one's going to out Christopher Reeve. So, if you're on board for some kind of a different look at Superman, almost maybe, I don't know if deconstruction is the right word, but there's certainly a different phase in his career, I guess you could say, than we've seen before. So he's being asked to do something a little bit different. He is very much, there's an internal struggle throughout this entire movie. So a lot of smoldering by Henry Cavill as he's thinking about the right thing to do, and he does it well.
I could see why they felt the need to go a different way, especially when you took something like Superman Returns that tries to literally just like copy and paste the Christopher Reeve aesthetic mindset into a modern sense. And it just really didn't work. It just didn't, it just didn't land for a lot of people. The movie just felt too indebted to what came before. So taking it in a different direction, seeing it to a different place, I can understand the mindset behind that. Obviously, the idea, especially at the time, stuff like Chris Evans' Captain America hadn't even really coalesced for people yet. So the idea of like Boy Scout superheroes was very much kind of, people weren't really interested in it. They just it came off boring. It came off as just kind of like, how do you make that interesting? And so they definitely take this in a more introspective kind of way. Like obviously, like you said, there's a lot of what am I supposed to do? There's a lot of changes to his parents where they're kind of far more conservative about trying to protect him with some of the stuff they say and some of the stuff they try to teach him. So it's definitely a different approach. So he's being asked to do something very different here. And I mean, if you're going to get a guy that needs to stand and smolder and kind of look off contemplative into the distance, Henry Cavill's pretty much your guy.
We got Amy Adams as Lois Lane. Now, Andrew, as someone I know would say, this is kind of a stacked cast.
Is it? Who says that?
I've heard it a few times said about different movies, but I think it is particularly true of this one. I mean, every name about to rattle off is a high profile, well-known actor, almost ironically, except for our lead of Henry Cavill, who was unknown at the time, but they surround him with a stellar cast. Of course, Amy Adams, Lois Lane, some big shoes to fill. I really love Margot Kidder's performance from the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. And I think, of course, she does a great job. She's one of the best actors out there today, period, of the past 20 years. She's so good. In 2013, even was definitely still on the rise, but had a few hits under her belt. Probably most known as Katie, the purse girl from The Office, from those 3 episodes of The Office, right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the high part. I don't think there's a whole lot of question there.
Yeah. I mean, she got an Academy Award nomination for this other movie she was in, but The Office. Come on.
Yeah, it's all about The Office. But no, obviously Amy Adams, tremendous actress. Obviously that kind of approach of casting an unknown and surrounding them with known talent. I mean, that's the original Superman too. I mean, Christopher Reeve, when that Superman movie gets made, is nobody, but around him is Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, Margot Kidder, known quantities at the time. But Amy Adams is doing a good job here. She gets that attitude, that kind of, I'm not going to really take any of your crap mindset. She shows up on military bases and is not letting them boss her around. Definitely has that attitude, has that energy. And like I said, Amy Adams is just tremendous. You can't really go wrong.
My favorite Amy Adams performance, Enchanted. Such a good movie.
Of course. Like, obviously.
So good.
Enchanted is the peak with the Muppets right after it.
Kevin Costner plays Jonathan Kent. Again, surrounding our lead with high-profile names. And, he's a Midwest farmer dad. Of course you cast Kevin Costner. Yeah. Very good casting, in my opinion.
Yeah, Kevin Costner, I think in this, like when they announced that like Kevin Costner was going to play Jonathan Kent, I was like, duh. Like who? Yeah. Like it was like a no-brainer. It was like, of course you are. Who else would it be? Like that's kind of even lining up with just like even on Smallville, they cast I think Jonathan Schneider from the Dukes of Hazzard, and it's just the same look, that Midwest kind of farm boy idea. And so getting the ultimate guy, Field of Dreams, Kevin Costner to do this is perfect. It's but like I said, alluded to earlier, they do take his character in a very different direction. Part of the kind of classic hallmarks of Superman is this kind of moral code kind of instilled into him, not just from the Kryptonian teachings he has, but from his Earth parents. This idea that, as they say in the original films, you're here for a reason, that you're here to help people. You were given these powers to do this. But in these movies, his parents are a lot more guarded. They're a lot more conservative, like I said, about his powers, trying real hard to make sure that nobody finds out about him. And that leads to some interesting moments.
It's strange. It's
an odd approach. I'm not going to lie. It's an odd approach for Superman.
Because he does say, quote unquote, the right thing sometimes. He's telling him, like, when you decide to make yourself known, like, you're going to change history, you're going to change humanity. And he says very prophetic stuff about Superman and what he's going to become. But he instills this sense that, like, the world's not ready.
Mhm.
and he never really gets to tell him like when the world will be ready. It's always
Right.
one day, one day. But for the time being, no one can know you have these abilities, and he
Right.
really drives that into his head to the point where he famously says that maybe he should have let a bus full of kids drown instead of save them.
Yeah, that was in the trailer, no less. So that was a
Yeah.
big point of contention early on to kind of have, because that's such a hard 180 from what the character is. Like, there's class, I can't imagine the Pa Kent of Superman the movie telling him something like that. You can't even fathom it. So but again, you're going for a different approach. You're looking for a little bit more moral ambiguity. And it's, like I said, is not to everyone's liking. That's even something that I'll admit to myself caught me off guard. I was kind of like, that seems odd.
But to get back to the performance of it all, what we're talking about here, he does a great job. He didn't write these
Yes.
lines. He didn't decide that, your thoughts on the character aside, Kevin Costner is perfect in the role. The peak for me is whenever he's talking to young Clark Kent and, he's telling him like, one day, again, one day you'll make this decision, you'll change humanity. And young Clark is getting overwhelmed and says, "Can I just keep pretending to be your son?" And Kevin Costner says, "You are my son." I mean, he's like
Yeah.
choking up
Great
as
scene.
he says it. So good. That hit me really, really hard.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, great scene. That hit me too, because it's because that is like a classic Jonathan Kent thing. Like, to be like, you're from this other world, you've got these powers, but you're still my son. Like, that's never in doubt. That's never in question. So yeah, glad that was something that did stick around.
Diane Lane plays Martha Kent, Jonathan's wife, Superman's adoptive mother, and does an awesome job. She gets, kind of like Kevin Costner had that scene with him I just talked about. She has a scene pretty early on in the movie with a very young Clark Kent when he's getting overwhelmed by his senses at school and ends up hiding in a closet. And she shows up to kind of talk him down, make him feel safe and comfortable. And very good de-aging, by the way. She looks fantastic in that scene. Really well done. And it's a nice moment, very motherly, very, small Kent. It just,
Yep.
it's hard to even like praise these because it's like, of course, casting, like
Right.
you were saying, like,
Yeah.
that's perfect casting. They show up, they do what they do, and it works. What more can you really say about it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, she gets that scene with young Clark kind of teaching him how to kind of parse out his senses and kind of find his kind of center while he's getting overwhelmed by all of this. I think that's really, really good. And she does a great job. Like you said, she's got some key scenes there. She ends up, obviously, throughout the course of this film, Pa Kent perishes, but she is alive through the whole context of this. And you can see that Clark, obviously, still super protective of his mother because Zod comes after her, and Superman's like, "No, not on my watch." And she has a scene where like a truck gets thrown into her house and she's digging through all the stuff and she's finding all the pictures of just Clark's
I
kid.
love that. Yeah, that's what she's got. It's such a mom thing. Like, oh, I got to get
just a mom
pictures.
thing. Like,
yeah,
it's like the rest of this is all stuff. You can replace stuff. I can't replace these. And just cool. Just, classic mom stuff. And like you said, they really sell that motherly relationship between the two.
Lawrence Fishburne plays Perry White. Excellent casting. I mean, this is almost, it's Lawrence Fishburne. He shows up. He's awesome. Perry White's not like instrumental to the plot of this movie or anything,
No, not
but
really.
in Superman lore, he's a well-known character. So let's get somebody high profile to play him. I mean, great job, Lawrence Fishburne. I don't know what more to say. Looks good in a suit.
Looks real good in a suit. He's got some cool scenes too. He's got one I really like towards the end. I'll talk about that in a second, but just like his casting's really good. I liked, just obviously, again, this is a role that's been defined by other people. I like Jackie Cooper in the original films. I even like Lane Smith in Lois and Clark, the television show. He plays Perry White there, and he's just a really good foil and sometimes comedic relief. But Lawrence Fishburne here, like I said, he's just really Lois's boss, kind of trying to keep her in check. But then later on in the film, just trying to you can see that like he believes in what she does and he's trying to guide her while still kind of trying to answer to his publishers. I like that Fishburne based his inspiration was Ed Bradley, who was a late correspondent for 60 Minutes. So he's using real life kind of reporters and correspondents as his inspiration. He does have a really cool scene I like late in the film where the Metropolis is kind of
Crumbling.
crumbling, and Jenny, one of the interns, gets stuck under this kind of piece of concrete and a bunch of rebar, and Perry's there with Steve Lombard, another Planet guy, and she's like terrified. She's like we're all literally the end is coming, and like Perry is like, nope, I'm gonna stay with you right here. We're gonna try to get you out. But then even when it seems like all hope is lost, Perry's like, he's not running to save himself. He's not doing anything. He's sticking by her side and letting her know that even at the end, Perry, he's still going to watch out for her. And I think stuff like that is just little cool shades you can add to show that there's just, again, you're showing that there's a morality to the character. You're going a little bit deeper into it. And I just think that's cool.
We have Russell Crowe as Jor-El.
I love his performance. I think it's great.
Very good. In my memory, he's in the movie. It's been a long time. Yeah, he's got a few, minutes in the movie. It's kind of stunt casting, get somebody well known. But I'm watching it, and he gets some stuff to sink his teeth into. They make him like work for it. Like there's this whole action scene where he's fighting and diving underwater. Like he worked his ass off. It's on Krypton. It's probably like green screen, but they're making him work for it.
He's not getting the Marlon Brando treatment here. He's not just kind of standing around talking. He actually gets kind of in the thick of it. And then he recurs kind of throughout a lot of the rest of the movie. He has sequences with Superman. He has sequences with Lois. So like he really, like you said, he works for it. He's not like on Krypton and then that's it. He comes back throughout the whole movie. But I do, if Michael Shannon wasn't putting everybody else out of a job throughout the course of this movie, Russell Crowe's Jor-El probably would have been my Mark Strong. In, I thought it was either going to be him or Michael Shannon. I thought it was going to be one of the two, but obviously Shannon just carries it off like just so far ahead of everybody else. It's not even fair. But like I think Russell Crowe obviously bringing, like you said, a different sensibility than Marlon Brando, but still kind of bringing in that. I believe the term is gravitas.
Yes.
But like you said, he gets to do a little bit of everything. He gets to do action. He gets to do monologues. He gets to do everything.
A lot of these actors have big shoes to fill. We've been talking about it. No exception for Jor-El. You're going up against Marlon Brando, but I think he blows it out of the water. I mean, Marlon Brando is playing Marlon Brando. He's there because he's well known. Like what he does specifically in the Superman movies is fine. He's a fine floating talking head or whatever your key scene of his is. But Russell Crowe is playing Jor-El. He's not playing Russell Crowe. He's pitting in a performance, unlike Marlon Brando, who I think was just there for his presence.
I mean, Marlon Brando's got some cool lines. Like obviously the speech he gives to Kal-El as he's launching off, like the son becomes the father becomes the son. It's a great speech, and I love it. But you're right, Marlon Brando really is like he's like if you're looking at stunt castings, that's what he is. Like especially if you read the stories where like he showed up, like he needed all of his scenes shot in like 2 weeks or something, and like he had cue cards the whole time.
Lines,
like a lot of stuff like that. It's very and again, I understand he's Marlon Brando. I get that. But at the same time, Jack Nicholson doesn't do that. Like he didn't show up late stage to stuff and not even know his lines. But you're right. Russell Crowe, I think here is, and he also, I think is just, he obviously gets more to do. Like I don't know if Marlon Brando is the kind of person who would have even been like, what, you want me to fight somebody? No, that's not happening. But like, Russell Crowe actually gets he gets a subplot on Krypton. Like the first 20 minutes of this movie is just, Russell Crowe on Krypton. And then he gets to recur and be like a guiding voice to Clark, to Lois, to a lot of others. So he gets far more to do. He gets a lot more to sink his teeth into. He gets a lot more to just work with. And he makes the most of it. Like you said, they make him work for it. He has to get in shape too, because he's another guy that has to put on the skin tight suit.
Sure. There's plenty more of this cast we could jump into and dive into. There's only one more on my list that I want to talk about. That is Harry Lennox as Lieutenant Swanwick. There's a lot of military people in this movie, but he's sort of the key one. And I think he does a very good job. And again, we are not talking about future movies and what happens in the story. He's playing a lieutenant in this movie, right? I know this guy from The Matrix, and I got to make a correction because on Ghost Rider, there's a guy from The Matrix in that movie as Captain Dolan. And he is in the Matrix movies. And for some reason, I said he's the person that Niobe is now dating, which is not true. She's dating this guy, Harry Lennox.
Oh, yeah.
That's his role in these movies. So official apology for that. But this is Niobe's love interest. Glad I got that fixed because Niobe was with Perry White, and
Right.
now she's with
Swanwick.
Yeah.
This is just I do like Harry Lennox a lot. I can't believe you're going to leave out my boy Elliot Stabler. You're not
I
even
mean, I
gonna give him a
love
mention.
Christopher Maloney.
He's-
Richard Schiff is another character.
Yeah.
The
I
actor
mean,
that I
obviously,
really
this
like,
is
but
it really is a stacked cast. There's
Yeah.
obviously like Maloney gets a little bit of an interesting Easter egg with the Guardian call sign, just making a little bit of a nod to the Guardian character.
explain this
that
to
was
me because
supposedly on
I don't know
purpose.
this.
Throughout the course of the movie, Christopher Maloney's Nathan Hardy has the call sign Guardian. Every time he's talking to somebody on a radio throughout the military stuff, he's using the code name Guardian. That is a reference to a character called Guardian, who is kind of a Captain America-esque superhero. He has a shield, throws it, but he's a different character. His name is not Nathan Hardy. It's like Jim Harper, I think. But that call sign, giving him the call sign of Guardian, was purposeful because Guardian himself has a bit of a tied connection to Superman, especially throughout the Death of Superman stuff. He's a character that factors in. So that was just an odd little Easter egg that I just thought was fun. And obviously Stabler is Stabler. He's great in everything.
Yeah. I mean, he gets a nice little arc in this movie. I guess we'll go ahead and talk about him because you're right.
Yeah.
He is awesome. He he's very anti-Superman. All aliens are bad. And then he's like, okay, Superman's a good guy. And then he also gives his life to help stop Zod.
Yep. It's basically him and Schiff, who plays Emil Hamilton, who works at Star Labs in the comics. They both end up sacrificing themselves to send the bulk of Zod's army back to the Phantom Zone. So it's a cool little, sacrificial moment, but at the same time, you don't die in the Phantom Zone. So they're out there. But yeah, like you said, a stacked cast. You could talk about this for a long time, but like it's unbelievable how they really did just go to all lengths for the cast of this movie. It's ridiculous.
Well, yes, we could talk about this cast more. We could talk about Michael Shannon all day long, but we've got to get to this movie. So let's jump into it. Specifically, what we like about this movie. What are the best scenes? And we're going to start at the high point with our favorite scenes. Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What's the best scene in the movie?
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm making an allegory, but I think the bit on Krypton at the beginning is probably my favorite part of this movie. Genuinely, honestly. I think, obviously, Superman's not really a part of this, but I like the aesthetic of Krypton here. Obviously, the crystalline structures of the Christopher Reeve films became like the standard for Superman for decades. Just that idea that, we're living on this weird, almost wintry type planet where everything's white, everything's made of crystals. It's a very iconic look, and I appreciated it when they brought it back for Superman Returns. But I was very happy to see them take a kind of more organic, kind of interesting, advanced aesthetic with it. I thought it all looked really cool. A good mix of fantasy and sci-fi together at times. And just this arc we get here of Jor-El, kind of still some classic Superman tropes here. Jor-El is pleading with the Council of Krypton that, you've been mining the planet's core. It's made it unstable. This planet is about to blow up. And the council or the elders basically being like, stop being ridiculous. That would never happen. Or really, what are you suggesting? And they think all of his ideas are even more ridiculous. And this leads to Zod's attempted coup, essentially. Now, Zod, what I find interesting here is Zod apparently agrees with Jor-El about the planet's ultimate fate. He agrees that the planet is in danger and that the elders are standing in the way of it. But I mean, he says later in the film, the only thing your father and I agreed on when he's talking to Superman is that we thought the elders of Krypton were fools and the planet was in danger. So Jor-El doesn't agree with his methods, doesn't like what he's doing. So he ends up fighting Zod and a bunch of his guys and then ends up running off to send Kal-El up into the stars. And is basically chased by Zod essentially the whole way. So it's this extended action sequence with Russell Crowe as Jor-El kind of getting this codex of Kryptonian information that is used to rebuild Krypton, putting it with Superman, getting him off the planet, still fighting Zod, and then ultimately perishing at Zod's hands. But all of this I think it's really, really cool. It's like I said, partly because we've given Jor-El a performance. Essentially, we've upgraded him from
Noble cameo.
noble cameo, mildly insightful dialogue spoken by a seasoned actor, into we're going to give him action sequences. We're going to give him the same kind of motivational dialogue. We're going to give him
A
the same kind
personality.
of stuff, a personality. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just all real. I like it a lot. I think it's really cool. The movie actually opens directly with like Superman's birth. It's like the first thing that we kind of witness. And then, ultimately builds to them launching Clark off the planet. And then obviously Zod is tried for his attempted coup because it fails. And they all get sent to the Phantom Zone, but it's seemingly Krypton's destruction that ends up freeing them from the Phantom Zone. So
Yeah, they're not in there very long, huh?
yeah, they really I don't know if it's meant to imply that there's a greater passage of time between when they go into the Phantom Zone and when they're freed, but like Zod makes it sound like they were floating for like eternity. And I was like, the movie makes it seem like you were in there for 5 minutes, bud. Like but all of this is just cool. I like the technological aesthetic. I like changing it up. It doesn't feel like we're doing it just to be different, or if we are, we've at least put in a lot of effort.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It looks very good, which is impressive because obviously this is, all CG, but it doesn't look that. It looks tangible. It looks real. I guess it's weird to say that word, but it looks it looks good. And you're right about the technology. It's so hard. It's almost deceptively hard to make a alien technology in a movie that doesn't look like some iteration of what we actually have in the real world, because that doesn't make any. They could have all had cell phones that had, I don't know, 2 screens, something silly like that. But like it looks alien, as it should. Like I love the like sonogram machine. They can see Clark Kent inside the womb, and it's made out of this. You don't know if it's like synthetic or organic or metal or liquid. You can't figure out what it is, and that's how it should be, because we don't understand alien technology. It's very, they're all speaking English for some reason. That's I'm not a knock at the movie. What else are you gonna do?
That's every sci-fi movie is guilty of that. But
yeah, it's I agree. It looks great. I love the scenes. I'm sold on Zod from like the beginning. And you're right, Russell Crowe does a great job. I'm not shortchanging him, but man, one of my notes just says, I won't even repeat it, but gosh darn, Michael Shannon rules. It's that I will find him line. It's so good.
Because he starts off just like, I will find him. Like he starts off like very like just very matter of fact, just like, you think he's safe, I'm gonna find him. And then like as he's like getting taken back and sent to the Phantom Zone, it like escalates into like this almost rage of just him, like you said, I will find him. And like just
so good.
It's so good. It's unbelievable.
They put him in these little capsules to send him up to the Phantom Zone. And Andrew, am I incredibly immature?
They looked a little phallic. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Okay, as long as I wasn't the only one who thought that.
Yep, they did.
Anywho.
It occurred to me.
But I agree. It's very good, and notably, it's something that we've really never seen on film before. We've seen Krypton technically. We've had these moments, but to this scale, all brand new and works very well. I agree. Great scene. It's not what I wrote down as my personal favorite, but it's a coin toss as far as I'm concerned. Really, my favorite is like anytime Michael Shannon is talking. He has a lot of great monologues in this movie. But in the spirit of what we're doing here, as far as a whole scene, what I wrote down is whenever Clark finds the ship and he's reunited with his dad, in a sense, Jor-El's consciousness is on the ship. It manifests itself as Russell Crowe, as Jor-El, and he's able to speak to his adult son. And it is a lot of like exposition where he's explaining to Clark the history of Krypton and stuff, and that's fine. But the reason what I want to cite as being my favorite part about this is he starts talking about his hope for his son. Now, Krypton, its ultimate doom, and is there an allegory here, Andrew? This planet that is doomed from its greed and obsessively using its natural resources, but no one can decide on the best course of action, and the government isn't making the right choices, and there's a coup and different ideas. I don't know what parallel you're possibly drawing from that, but
It's not ringing any bells, that's for sure.
where Krypton
I can't possibly think of anything.
where Krypton really went wrong, if I may, is they really tried to create like a utopia, and humans are no longer, well, not humans, excuse me, people, Kryptonians are no longer born naturally. They're sort of bred for specific purposes. So Zod is like the perfect general, and their high council, like the perfect high council, and everybody has their perfect jobs, but society doesn't work that way, man. And it ultimately causes their doom. And Jor-El and his wisdom and his wife Lara have the wisdom that like this isn't going to work. You need that chance. You need choice. And so they have Clark naturally, or excuse me, Kal-El naturally, and they want him to restart Krypton with a new vision. So he's explaining all of this to Clark, and just a dad talking about his hope for his son and what his son can be. And he gives a great monologue, but I just wrote down it ends with this: you will give the people an ideal to strive for. In time, you will help them accomplish wonders. That's Superman, man. I mean, they're kind of saying it, not showing it for most of this movie, which is, if I've got to give a criticism, that's where it's going to be. But I can't fault them for at least saying it. And in that scene, I think they're really nailing what makes Superman special. And it's immediately followed by Clark getting his Superman suit, walking out of the ship, and testing the limits of his powers, and going on his first flight, and just exhilarating action sequence of him flying around, basically flying around the world, flying in outer space. It reminds me a lot of like in the Hulk. We both liked the scene at the very end of that movie where Hulk is finally free and leaping through the mountains, because the movie kind of finally opened up, and it's like, yeah, this is what we signed up for. And that's what this scene is for Man of Steel. And thankfully, it doesn't come 2 hours into the movie. It doesn't make us wait that long. Like, it hits at the right time. We get some good Superman imagery. I like the interaction between Jor-El and Clark. It all works. I like it.
That scene where he learns to fly would have been my favorite scene, if not for the Krypton one. That specific sequence of him like walking outside wearing the suit for the first time, the sun shining down on him, and then just like really testing that limit. Because and this isn't meant as a knock, this is a different take, but it's one of the few sequences in the movie where Superman kind of looks excited about what's happening. Like, he's like, wow, like I can fly. Like, that's,
yeah.
And like the joy of being able to do that is like tangible, because it's something that like, it's one moment where like he's free from everything else. Like, obviously the burden of being found out is not with him because he's in the middle of nowhere. Obviously the Zod threat has not appeared yet. So it's really just him, this new knowledge of his history and his life, and just seeing what happens. And there's this joy that comes through. And it's I like it a lot, that sequence where like, because he jumps around a lot and kind of flops around. It doesn't, but then like he does the thing where like he almost creates like an anti-gravity field around himself, because you see these rocks kind of start to hover, and then he blasts off into the air and he's flying. And it's really, really cool. It's something that I think would work. Really, this is something that could work in any kind of Superman context. That idea of just being able to like harness his powers and learn how they work. That's not something they've used or done a whole lot before in the movies. So I just think it's really, really cool. And it's that sequence, like you said, it's just all very well done here.
Yeah. I like the way it's portrayed, because at first he's leaping large distances, just like Hulk, and just like really classic OG Superman. He can just leap really far.
Yep. And
the physics of it look right. It doesn't look floaty. It looks powerful. There's impact when he lands. I really like the physics of this movie. The fight with Zod at the end, like their superhuman punches, look really good. Honestly, it looks a lot like the video games Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe, or what are the ones they made after that? Injustice,
yeah.
These big, powerful punches, and they kind of hold a pose at the end of the punch. There's a weight to it all that is kind of hard to do, especially with these big epic Superman fights where characters can kind of fly and stuff. It's easy to start looking kind of floaty, but they sell every punch, and like I said, the physics just feel on point, which is hard to do with such an, we don't know what it looks like for a human to leap 500 yards, but
Right.
it looks right when it's right, it looks wrong when it's wrong, and it looks right here.
It does. And I think like that whole, it just feels, like, again, we're putting in the effort, putting in the work, trying to figure out if we can, translate that across. And like you said, it comes through. It looks really, really good.
Now, when the movie opens, before he gets a suit and everything, there's some flashbacks to his childhood and stuff, but really we see Clark wandering America, kind of like I said in the synopsis, just going from town to town, job to job, trying to find his place. And inevitably, whenever his powers get revealed or he uses them, he moves on to the next location because his dad, Paul Kent, really drove into his brain that the world is not ready. This reminds me, this has to be directly inspired by the Incredible Hulk, the TV series, because that's pretty much the premise of that show, him wandering from town to town, solving problems with his powers. There's even the shot of him hitchhiking that is like right out of literally.
I was just waiting for the Lonely Man theme to start playing while he's walking down the road.
Exactly. But it's cool. That's another, different take on Superman, or at least different part of his life that we haven't seen before. And I think it's really well done.
Yeah, in the Reeve films, what ends up happening is, I don't think this translates very well, but he ends up going to like the Fortress of Solitude when he's like 18, and then like he leaves when he's 30. So the implication in the Reeve films is he's legit in the Fortress of Solitude, learning history and his powers and everything for 12 years, which is nuts to think about. Like, were you able to call anyone while you were in there? Like, you just disappear? Like, what was up? But yeah, so in this one,
it's
we
the
get
Fortress
to see
of Solitude, Andrew. You don't make.
I understand
calls.
that, but then he brings Lois there, like in the next movie. It's like when Alfred just lets Vicky Vale into the Batcave. This is just what we're doing now, Alfred. Is that what's hot in the streets? But so like in this one, obviously we're seeing Clark kind of wandering, kind of aimless. Like they kind of dive into it when Lois is doing her investigation of like, he was like a busboy at a restaurant for like a couple of months, and then like he was, what was the name of the show where they crab fished? I can't remember. Deadliest Catch. Yeah. So like he does Deadliest Catch for a while, where he's just like on a boat, and like that's when he goes. Basically, he works in a place until I guess he is forced to do something big, and then he disappears.
It's exactly what Michael Fassbender was doing in X-Men Apocalypse.
Yeah. Although to be fair, if you're trying to keep a low profile, you would think vanishing after the big act is not the way to do it. But that just makes it seem more obvious.
You're right. However, the movie addresses this directly, and I think it's a great Superman moment in this movie. And it's whenever Lois eventually tracks him down by following these myths, these stories that build up around these different acts that he's done. And that's when he explains that like the world's not ready to see what I do. My dad gave his life believing that. And she says, well, the only way you're going to hide is to stop helping people. And that doesn't sound like something you can do.
Right.
And yeah, because you're right. He wants to hide. He wants to be normal, but he just can't help helping people.
No,
that's Superman.
It is. And it's cool. It's a different approach. So he kind of gets a chance to kind of travel, wander, steal boots out of the back of somebody's car. It's but yeah, there's some cool stuff here where like obviously you're getting to see him just kind of having to be, still trying to figure out who is Superman, because like in this one he doesn't get the green crystal out of the ship that he knows to go throw into the Arctic and find all of this. He doesn't have that direction, so he's kind of really trying to find himself and find out what it means. And so it's an interesting approach that again takes it in a different place.
First big action scene is that oil rig that's on fire, and it's during his Deadliest Catch phase. And he goes and saves those guys, and pretty cool image of him ripping the door off, and he's literally on fire. But of course he's Superman. And then for the helicopter to get off the rig in time, he's got to hold up this giant steel tower that's falling over, and he's doing it and he's holding it back. And I love like there's a shot of like close up like on his abs. Like, look how strong Superman has to work for this.
Look at the flex on those abs, folks.
But the steel that he's standing on is like bending. Like he's literally stronger than steel, a man of steel, if you will. Is that what they were going? I get it. No, I get it now. No, I like that. And I like kind of showing that like he's not faltering, but literally the structure
beneath him is. I think that was a cool image and just a cool thing to do.
And then he falls into the water and his arms are outstretched for some reason. I'm not sure what
Yeah, I
parallel
don't.
that's supposed to
Yeah,
be.
it's making some sort of illusion, maybe, but it's not coming to me. I like everything with General Zod on Earth. Like, I think like when he gets to Earth,
I like everything on Earth about Michael Shannon.
yes,
Michael
everything
Shannon
about
on this
Michael
Earth
Shannon, but
is so good.
I found a way to talk about Michael Shannon again, so I'm going to. But like when they first come to Earth, there's this weird thing where like the ship they're on like mimics Krypton's atmospheric conditions, so they don't have the powers. That's kind of the thing. So when they come down to Earth, they're wearing like gas masks because I guess Earth's atmosphere is different than Krypton's, so they're wearing these masks. And like Superman ends up like ripping Zod's off, and that's when Zod gets like exposed to the yellow sun and actually gets hit with all of his powers, and it disorients him. And he's just not sure what to do, and he kind of freaks out. And he kind of ends up leaving. But there's these a couple of scenes later on where like he lands down on Earth and he just like rips off his helmet, and it's just him figuring it out. He's like, all right, I'm a trained military guy. Let's get all my senses back in order. And so he gets it and he figures out how the hearing and the vision works, and he gets it all squared away. And then we get like recurring little bits of this later. Like later on, it's when he learns to fly. Like he figures that out. Like he finally just like rips all his armor off because he's like, well, I don't need any of this. And then that's when he like does the same thing that Superman did earlier and creates that little, and then just starts flying. And then the same thing with like his heat vision, where like he figures that out for the first time. And these are just these cool little, like he's doing it with this military focused, tactile, this militant drive that he has, tells him and masters all of these senses far faster than Superman has. Because even the argument you can make is Superman still hasn't figured out all of his powers, but Zod is not just doing it, he's doing it on the fly, basically. And he's able to use all of this as he's adapting his strategy to fighting Superman. And I just think all of that's cool. And like even before he figures things out, like Superman flies before he does. So Superman like gets knocked up and he's flying at the top of a building. So Zod just starts like crawling up the side of the
like
building.
Like an animal, yeah.
Because he can't fly yet. And like in my head, I was like, well, why isn't he flying? And I was like, oh, because he can't do that yet. He doesn't know how to do it. So he's, even without the flying, he's still adapting and doing things. And just seeing that stuff on the fly, I just thought it was all very in line with the character. It was very in line with the performance. And it was just cool to like see that different aspect of like, what if the bad guy's figuring out all of his powers? How is he approaching it? How is he doing it?
So good. Yeah. Let's talk about Zod some more. I agree. I love because like we're talking about his military dedication to this cause. Well, once Superman destroys his ship and he can no longer bring back Krypton, he's like untethered from this cause. It reminds me, again, going back to the Matrix, reminds me of like Agent Smith being unhooked and going rogue. And that's what happens to Zod. He goes from like, he's not quite the villain where like you kind of is a tragic villain and you understand their motivation. He's not quite there.
You're not empathizing with him, really.
No, but you get what's going on. He's military adhesion to this mission that he has. But once that's gone, and he's got some great dialogue for what happens there.
Oh yeah,
he's like he's defeated afterwards, and Superman walks up to him and he says, "I exist only to protect Krypton. This is the sole purpose for which I was born, and every action I take, no matter how violent or how cruel, is for the greater good of my people. And now I have no people. My soul. That is what you have taken from me." And we get like this turn, like he becomes a villain. He becomes evil because he no longer has this mission. And now it's just like, all right, it's me and you, Kal-El. One of us is going to die. Like, this is it. You took it from me. I have nothing. I'm going to take your life. Only way you can stop me is to kill me. And he says as much. And they have a pretty good fight throughout the city. There's some really cool moments. I love whenever Zod has this giant steel beam and he's swinging at Superman, about to hit him. And Superman uses his vision to melt the steel beam. So when he swings it, it's not long enough to hit him.
Right.
Very creative, very cool stuff.
Yeah. Like I said, he has that line, like Zod even says to him, he's like, this only ends one way, Cal. You die or I die. Like that's because at that point, that's all it is to Zod. It's like, I am literally, my only point now in life is to kill you and then kill everybody here, essentially.
And then my favorite Zod dialogue. It's right after that part with the steel beam. And you're right, he's mastered his senses. He's about to strip off his armor, but he says, I was bred. I'm gonna do a Michael Shannon here. You ready? He goes, I was bred to be a warrior, Cal. Trained my entire life to master my senses. Where did you train? On a farm? It's
Yes.
so awesome. He takes off his armor, then he flies up. Oh, that's my favorite part of the movie. That's not quite long enough to be like an entire scene,
Right,
but
yeah, but
that
it's
part
like-
right there, I'm like, hell yeah. And he's wearing a black suit. He's wearing essentially a black Superman suit, which is pretty cool. This movie's explanation for Superman's suit, it's been different over the years, but essentially it's that it is their under armor beneath their exterior armor, which is ironic that the suit itself is underwear, but this suit notably doesn't have the red
underwear on it. Yeah. I like just everything was on there. Yeah, that line, where did you train? A farm? That just gave me very similar vibes to Obadiah Stane and Iron Man, where he's like, Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a bunch of scraps. But just so good. And just like I said, watching Shannon or Zod rather, kind of figure it all out, like on the fly in his head, going through it, just like it's so well done. And like you said, there is this turn because obviously his mission is bad. He's doing bad things this whole movie, but it's with this misguided sense of loyalty. Because like he says, his loyalty is to Krypton. But that moment when his people are gone, his plan is ruined, and it's just him, you see this turn from misguided loyalist to sociopath. It changes. It flips from I'm doing this because I'm doing it for the betterment of Krypton to I'm doing this because I want to hurt you. It just completely switches, and it's just so well done. It's can't say enough good things about Michael Shannon as General Zod.
During the fight, there's a fun little Easter eggs. There's a big truck that says LexCorp. They go in outer space. There's the Wayne satellite. So this movie does a good job just telling the story it's telling. It's not, you don't see, have Bruce Wayne walk by or, all these unnecessary starts and stops. So that's a good level of world building, in my opinion, where it's there, you see it, you get it, but it's not detracting from the story or anything. So I definitely appreciated that.
I agree. I think it's a good move to kind of make it a lot more subtle. I wish that all superhero movies would be a little bit more mindful of that sometimes. The Easter eggs and the teases can sometimes kind of feel like you're getting hit in the face with a 2x4 sometimes. But I think this movie, they're finding a real good balance of this is a Superman story, but we're acknowledging that there's this greater world. And I think also taking a break from Lex Luthor. I think that was a good decision. Obviously people could be like, well, he's Superman's most known foe. I'm like, yes, but he's also been in 4 of the 5 Superman movies we've made so far, including the one that was not made less than 10 years before this. I'm fine with you guys taking a break from Lex Luthor for a film, which is what they did.
Batman Begins didn't need Joker.
Exactly. These characters are rich enough and deep enough that you can dive into these characters and you can let certain things fly by. I still haven't gotten Brainiac in a movie. I don't know how, but I haven't, but we'll hopefully get there one day. But yeah, I like that level of world building. I think it's just, like I said, it's not distracting. Because like you said, you ride that fine line of there's even teases that I'm like, oh man, that's really cool. But when you think about it in the scope of the movie, you're just but it makes no sense here. Why are we doing this? It's just derailing the movie. With this, it's cool little nods. At blink and you miss it kind of stuff too. Really if you're not paying attention, you won't see either of those. So I think that's always kind of a nice way to approach it.
There's some good young Clark Kent scenes. I talked about earlier about when he's in class and he starts getting overwhelmed by his senses, his powers are starting to come in. Reminds me so much of Daredevil. Yeah, the same thing when Daredevil first wakes up and he can hear everything and gets overwhelmed. But in this case, it's his X-ray vision mostly that he can see kind of everything all at once and kind of phasing in and out. I thought it's a very cool visual and representation. Yeah. I really like whenever a little bit older Clark Kent is getting bullied by those kids and he resists the urge to punch them into orbit or whatever would happen if he punched back, and he gets pushed down against a fence. And then whenever Jonathan Kent walks over, the kids take off And whenever Clark Kent gets up, you see the fence pole that he was holding onto is like crushed, like because he was holding back his strength and his rage. Very cool, subtle little visual. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's a cool way. And then like it actually shows like a change as he gets older, because there's that scene in like the restaurant / bar that he works at later where the dude goes to shove him and he just doesn't move. Like he just like the guy goes up to push him and he's just completely still. And then the guy dumps a beer on him, and it's just a really weird, sad kind of scene.
There's the young Clark Kent scene where he's on the school bus and he's getting bullied. And I wrote down the insult that the kid calls him. And normally I edit the stuff out. I'm going to not edit it because it wouldn't make much sense. So I'm going to use the nickname for Richard here in a moment. Fast forward 45 seconds if you don't want to hear it. But the kid calls him Dick Splash. Andrew, have you ever heard someone called Dick Splash?
No.
It's one of those weird PG-13 insults that don't actually exist, and it usually involves the word dick. There's like Dick Splash, cheese dick, dickweed. Like I hear these in movies all the time. I'm like, who talks like this? What are they teaching you in screenwriting?
Like who's like it's not even like their old sayings. Like here's dirt in your eyes, at least a thing people used to say. Like it's just something where it's just like, did you just make up a PG-13 curse word? And the answer is probably yeah.
I think so. It's so weird. And that's
very weird.
That is more off-putting to me. Like just call them just the word without splash. Just do that. Like, why are we adding this? What are we guys, what are we doing here?
Well, like it's so weird too, because like
I would have been like, what the hell did you just call me? What does that mean, bully?
Well, and like it's weird because like the whole reason he calls him that is he's like, you watched the game last night? And I was like, wait. What do you like? You're insulting him because like he hasn't answered if he watched like the football game last night. It's just such an odd, like this is the strangest bullying I've ever seen.
Small town America, man. Football is everything.
Did you see that ludicrous display last night?
Speaking of sports, here's a little transition there. There's a scene. It's actually like the dream sequence. I think it's whatever Zod is in his head, but Clark is wearing a Kansas City Royals t-shirt. Yes. Which is cool. I mean, it's a real from Kansas. Now we've talked about in other episodes, like it opens up a whole can of worms. Like, wait, our world, our cities exist in this world, but beyond all that, it's just cool to see him wearing a Royal shirt, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's a Wilhelm scream in this movie. Did you catch that?
Is there a Wilhelm?
Yeah. However you say it, you know what I'm saying.
Always gets a chuckle out of me anytime I hear it. Oh, there actually is another blink and you miss it Easter egg in this movie too that I forgot to mention. But during one of the sequences where they're kind of panning through the skyline, you see this brief, literally blink and you miss it sign for Blaze Comics. And in DC Comics, Blaze Comics is the company that publishes Booster Gold's comic books that he has published about himself.
Well, you know what, Andrew? I did not notice that, but that kind of answers a question that I had. One of the last shots in this movie is a flashback to a young Clark Kent on the farm wearing a like towel as a cape and superhero posing. And I'm wondering, because I'm watching this, like, who is he imitating? But Blaze Comics exists, so he's imitating.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a thing or not. It's always interesting because that was something that I really liked about. There's this seminal. This is a bit of a tangent, but follow me if you will. There's this seminal issue of the Flash number 123. It's the issue of DC Comics that establishes the multiverse by establishing that the Golden Age Flash, Jay Garrick, exists on a different Earth from the Silver Age Flash, Barry Allen. But what they establish in that story is that Barry Allen read comics as a kid about Jay Garrick. So the comics being written in Barry's Earth were based off of adventures in Jay's Earth that were somehow crossing over and being published. So the Flash, and this is like I said, this is like 56, 57, like are literally the Flash was outed as like a kid who read comic books and was inspired by those comic books to become the Flash later. So maybe that's what happened here. Who knows? But
maybe,
but yeah,
maybe. He watched Christopher Reeve movies.
Yeah. He watched Christopher Reeve's unrelated Superman movie.
Well, Andrew, we like to ask this question: how does this function as an adaptation of the source material?
This is I'm not gonna butter this up. This is a controversial subject. There are obviously some liberties taken here. If you watch the Christopher Reeve Superman movie and the Superman movie back to back, you're gonna see a lot of differences. Superman's morals are typically portrayed as this like ironclad thing that he's kind of instilled into him. This movie plays that with a lot more ambiguity, creates a lot more kind of troubled character, internally struggling, just kind of not sure where he fits in the world. Really kind of trying to approach it from a perspective of like, say somebody with these powers did appear on the planet. How would you treat that? It tries to take that almost real world approach to it, which again, mileage may vary. As an adaptation of your classic Superman stories, like I said, you're definitely looking at some heavy departures here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really hit the nail on the head with that. They take that realistic, grounded approach. That's obviously what worked so well for Christopher Nolan and his Batman trilogy. Warner Bros., I think, very clearly wanted more of that and something in that vein, and they kind of applied that idea to Superman, and this is the result that we get. Most notably, what people point to as far as a departure, or some people say betrayal to the source material, is Superman killing General Zod. He puts him in that situation where he has to kill him. And I'm not going to tell you if you should be okay with that or not. That's for everybody to decide. But focusing on the positives, what I appreciate is that after he does kill him, Henry Cavill sells the hell out of, he hates that he had to do this. I mean, he just screams and almost breaks down in the tears. Not only that he had to kill someone, but he had to kill the last of his kind, essentially. That obviously is something that's going to weigh very heavily on him. I mean, he sells that it's not just like, okay, I had to do what I had to do, kill him. I'm a guy who kills now. It's definitely not an easy decision he had to make. So the movie at least recognizes that, and I can appreciate that.
Yeah, it definitely tries to paint that into a corner of like, there's no choice here. Basically, it's basically Zod kills these people or I kill Zod. That's the moral quandary that they present to him. And obviously he chooses to kill Zod, which at this point, he doesn't know how to get people back from the Phantom Zone. We don't know if he even has the ability to do that. So as far as he knows, this is the last Kryptonian that he knows of. And so they do try to create that sense of heaviness around doing that and make it seem like it was not something done lightly, and show that it's something that will seemingly stick with him.
Now, the very, very end of this movie is awesome because it's essentially like building up the debut of Clark Kent. And he's been Clark Kent throughout the movie, but the Metropolis living, Daily Planet working Clark Kent, the persona that he puts on. We talked so much during our Christopher Reeve Superman episodes about how good he is about playing two distinct characters. Henry Cavill does not have to do that in this movie. No. I'm not saying he can't do that, but I'm saying the script does not require it. He doesn't have this disguise that he puts on. But this movie is hinting that maybe in the next installment we will see that. And it goes so far as to like him getting on the elevator and he's putting on iconic glasses. And just before you see him in glasses, the elevator doors close. Like they're really teasing
building it up.
Clark Kent. It's pretty funny. So he's walking onto the floor of the Daily Planet. And I love this line from Amy Adams. She's introducing herself. And of course she knows who he is.
Right.
She says, Lois Lane, welcome to the planet.
Yeah.
It's good. It's perfect. It's on the nose, sure, but
it's got layers, Chris. It's an onion of a line. There are so many layers to it.
I liked it. It was very good.
It's a nice little. It's a little subtle. But not
the
really
movie
subtle.
Gets the movie. It gets heavy with all the Zod stuff. So having this last little note of levity the movie on, I appreciated for sure.
Yeah, that was a fun little line. And so the end of this movie seemingly sets up the classic Superman status quo at this point of, working at the Daily Planet, Lois as a love interest, Superman, so it's kind of using this movie to kind of get him to the classic idea of Superman, or at least the setup, not necessarily anything else. But it's a nice, like I said, lighter moment to end on after the heaviness of before.
I think that does it for us for this week. That's Man of Steel. There's plenty to like in this movie, even if you're not super thrilled with the direction they take Superman. There's still moments that I think are quote unquote classic Superman. I think there's great performances throughout, especially our boy Michael Shannon. Literally, if you only watch it for him, you're gonna have a good time. He's so good in this.
I would say watch this. Like, even if you know you don't like aspects of it, just watch it for Michael Shannon. Just wait till he's back on screen, hit play again, and and then
So
when you're
good.
done, go back and watch it again. Where's the Shannon cut? That's what I want. Give me more Michael Shannon.
And then whenever you're done watching Michael Shannon, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. Just like this one left by Crypto Zookeeper, who says, more like best of the best.
Nice.
This podcast is a joy. The hosts have great chemistry, and even though they're talking about movies that are critically panned, they make it an absolute delight. They focus on the best elements of these movies, which will bring listeners right back to those stronger elements as well if they've seen them. Multiple times listening to this podcast, I have found myself thinking, oh yeah, maybe that movie wasn't as bad as I thought. They also seem to be incredibly knowledgeable about the source material for these movies and even go into production facts for the films, which are incredibly interesting. Glad I found this.
We're glad you found it too. Jinx, owe me a Coke.
I thank you for those kind words, and I'm glad that you think we are somewhat knowledgeable. My 30 plus years on this planet obsessively studying movies and reading Wikipedia articles and watching movies is finally paying off. All this, what I thought was useless knowledge, I can now share it with everybody.
Exactly.
Guys, be sure to follow us on social media. We are everywhere: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, even YouTube at BOTRcast. Give us a follow, drop us a line, let us know your Mark Strong Award winners for various movies. And as always, shoot us an email if there is a superhero movie that you like that was poorly received upon release. Tell us why you like it. What are your favorite scenes? What's the best performance? bestoftherestpod@gmail.com. When we cover that movie, we will read your email on the episode. Until then, remember, maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impressed for the music. Check him out on YouTube and Twitter. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way we're going to grow, and we certainly appreciate it. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. Diane Lane plays Ma Kemp.
Her name escapes me.
I tried.